There's one thing I just can't figure out, and that is why does everyone hate Viserys?
I think that's obvious. But let's take a bit of a closer look at why.
I just see people hating him.
He's so crusty.
But is that a good enough a reason to hate him? No.
Obviously.
But there are
Oh,
so many
no.
more reasons.
Yes, many more to come.
Did you say yes?
No! I
Okay. Shall
love
we try it?
crusty old men. Does he have anything good about him?
I mean, he's the coolest Walking Dead I have ever seen.
That is actually a pretty good point. I haven't thought about that.
He does really rock that decaying look. I must admit.
And it's really nice to see that he's showing some support for Aemon by also taking out his own eye. You think he gifted it to Alicent?
Yeah, why didn't he do that? Okay, I'm starting to see why people hate him. I feel like a lot of people are very unfair. They're hating on this old man who just wants to be left in peace and play with his Lego set. And I mean, they're just really interrupting this man's hobby and his life, and they're really just pestering him.
Yeah, that's true. Like, all he wants is to bring that babe out. Like, it's not good for the babe to stay in. He can't breathe in there.
He's a liberator, really.
Mm-hmm. A reverse conqueror. It does feel like a bit of a chaotic intro, this.
I mean, aren't those the best? I feel like if you're not up for the chaos, why are you even here?
We, of course, all have questions about Viserys. There's so many to ask. Questions like, is Viserys the worst father in Westeros? Is he responsible for the dance of the dragons? Did he rightfully butcher his wife? Did he do anything right? When would have been the best time for Viserys to die?
So I suppose you do have a point. He did a little bit more than just play with his Lego set. Where do we start? Do we start with the most gruesome?
Like the incest when he marries his cousin?
Okay, you do have a point. We're definitely not going to rank this by what is worse.
The very beloved Queen Emma. We're starting off with one of the biggest, surprisingly, controversies surrounding Viserys' character. I don't know if either of us is gonna really argue that he was in the right, but some people do.
Right. And for everyone who's gonna say that Emma was marked for death anyways, because the Maester said that her and the babe would not both live, may I remind you that consent is the difference between criminal activity and legally performing a medical procedure. Really, I think that's what it boils down to, right? This was not going to be a happy day for Emma either way, but refusing to even let her know what was happening.
It's like here are her last moments, and Viserys knows that she will die from this. And instead of letting her be informed and have any sort of decision on how the end of her life is going to be.
And I don't understand how so many people just brushed past this as if like, oh, but she was going to die anyways. Like, it's so... Like, this wasn't just tragic just because she died. It's how she died. The tragedy is we'll never know, but there is a pretty good chance she would have just... The outcome would have been the same because she might have really wanted to save the baby over herself anyways. But it's that betrayal of not even treating her as a human with a choice. It's just... Bring the knife.
Bring the blade. Bring the babe.
I mean,
there's more to the stuff about Emma than just how she died. Granted, that is
right. That's
the worst. Nasty business. Cannot support it. Will not support it. I don't think there's too much more to say about it, really.
I mean, it's heavily implied that Daemon did not make the same obsessive choice that his brother did when Laena was in that same position.
Yeah, and that's Daemon.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, Viserys' wish, desperate wish for a male heir was well established in a way that doesn't seem like Daemon had that same obsession.
Sure. If he were as obsessed, he might have well done the same. I still think it speaks to the fact that Viserys didn't truly view Emma as a person in her own right as much as she was the key to him getting an heir more than anything else. I still think he loved her in some way.
I think so too, especially with how much guilt and regret he carried.
But we see this as you mentioned, it's not just this, her final day, that was really reflects poorly on Viserys. It's also what we view from their relationship, that her entire being over seemingly quite a long time has been about Viserys pushing Emma to repeatedly get pregnant, despite, as we learn, all of these very tragic outcomes. And it truly seems to have taken a toll on her. And as she's saying, this is the last time, I mean, he doesn't even respond. It's just a little bit sinister, I think. And he just keeps fixating on sort of the glory that Emma is finally going to give him a son.
Yeah, I really feel bad for her. Pumping out child after child, or attempting to. And like even in the first episode, like the pressure for that child to be male is absurd. Like they have nothing, no proof, no evidence of the child's gender, and yet Viserys is throwing a huge tourney for his new heir, and Emma is just like, she's not convinced it's a male. I mean, she does have the baby during the tournament, while Viserys and the rest are sitting up there cheering and having fun, and she's lying down there screaming. It's like her last day on this earth, and they're just having entertainment above ground, watching knights and horses run around. Viserys just sitting there, waiting for his Foodora delivery.
I think maybe it's a little bit difficult for some people to kind of reconcile the fact that there can be love and there can also be torment at the same time. But what kind of mistake is this? It's definitely an ethical mistake. It's a moral mistake. It's a very failure of being a human mistake, I think. Is it perhaps also a political mistake?
Is it?
I don't know, because if his goal is to have an heir, does he have any other way than just keep pushing this poor woman to have more children? Can he just accept that Daemon is now his heir instead because Emma can't have any more children because it's killing her? Or maybe he can take a different wife and Emma could have lived?
That's a good point. I do think that they had some issues with having multiple wives after the Targaryens came to Westeros. And
That's
so they
true.
sort of separated themselves from that tradition. But yeah, it would probably have given Emma relief and a longer life with less pressure.
He could have even gone as far as to name Laenor as his successor rather than Daemon if he wanted to do that. Because he does end up just naming an heir anyways.
The next point, I think, is the only child he has. Our dear Realm's Delight, Rhaenyra.
I just have to ask, because it seems like a lot of people seem to think that's one of his better achievements. They seem to kind of celebrate the relationship between them.
What relationship? We do see from the very first episode that Rhaenyra doesn't seem like she feels important to Viserys. It's heavily implied that he has failed since she was a child to make her feel like she has much worth at all, because she's not a son, and that's what he wants. He wants a son. He wants an heir, and in no way does she qualify as an heir in his eyes. So she's just like this little creature that exists and reminds him that he doesn't have a son.
It's actually really sad, as she's telling Alicent she hopes he has a son because it's all he's ever wanted.
It's so sad, and Viserys and Emma have been trying to have children for so long, and Rhaenyra is the only one they have, and the fact that Viserys doesn't even celebrate and dote on her, his only child at this point, it's really sad that he's still just obsessed with having a boy. And when he finally does decide to name her heir, it's not even because he has changed his mind and realized how unfair it is. It's because he's upset with his brother Daemon, and he wants to punish Daemon, and they're putting in Rhaenyra as what everyone believes is just a placeholder to keep Daemon away. It's kind of revealed that he does this because of the guilt he's suffering as well for Emma. But this idea doesn't develop in Viserys' head. It comes from his hand, Otto, who is suggesting Rhaenyra be made heir. And then naming her heir is just completely fucking up her life, where what she wants to do is ride on her cute dragon with Alicent and eat cake and live a life of luxury and happiness. And making her heir is equivalent with all the things she does not want, which is to have a lot of children and get married and suffer all these political fools all the time.
Yeah, it seems very opposite of what her character is inclined to truly want. And it's just so wild because it's as if he doesn't even know her at all, that he thinks this is a good idea. And instead, it's kind of like she's a pawn, as you're saying, when he's just doing it to spurn Daemon.
And it's so sad when we see in, I believe it's episode 6.
Yes, I was a child. And look at what my life became without you.
When she's calling her own life a droll tragedy.
Does she actually do that?
Yeah. She says that to Daemon on the beach.
Droll tragedy.
She could have had such a great life. If anyone could have had a life of luxury and fun and adventure, it would have been Rhaenyra on Syrax. It could have been great. All of the cake, all of the fun, and as many lovers as she wanted.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been fantastic. So, way to go on fucking up her life.
Yeah. And I don't think Viserys would have forced her to marry either. Or like put that pressure on her, if not for the fact that she was heir and needed to like establish her position and her line.
The only reason she actually goes along with it is to still be counted as heir, because he wants to disinherit her after she's taken advantage of by her uncle.
She does say she thought she wanted to be heir, even if it didn't give her the life that she wanted, which is very sad. But it's also very sad that after Viserys decides to name her heir, he's doing nothing to help her claim that position. He's changing nothing else. He's not giving her an important place at the table. He's not establishing that she has a say, or teaching her how to maintain ties with the lords in order to have them renew their oaths, which Viserys should have taught her how to do. He should have been loud and proud of his heir and how he's made this change and kept reinstating time and time again that she is still to be heir, especially when he has new children. Well, the majority of people are just assuming that Aegon is the new heir.
And I think it's interesting that you're touching on that she should have been Viserys' pride. I'm wondering if that is playing into why Rhaenyra even kind of becomes so fixated on continuing to be heir, because he's clearly never shown that he's proud of her, and he's only really showing interest in her as heir. So it's kind of her gateway to being interesting and accepted and important and valuable to her father, and that is just, how tragic is that? Daddy issues, anyone? Can we start a club?
It's so sad. And she's showing interest and promise when she's made heir, and yet she remains a cupbearer.
The fact that he's not commanding respect for her as an heir is so wild. So when it comes to Rhaenyra, there's definitely the point that Viserys is truly failing her, both politically and kind of in training her, but also on a very, very human level. Him marrying her best friend is such a dick move.
It's wild, especially when there's like other offers who most would argue are stronger matches for him. So it's purely a selfish move.
His only daughter has just lost her mother, and now he's also blowing apart her possibly only, at least her closest friendship.
And then he also announces his marriage plans in front of the council and Rhaenyra, like at the same time, instead of like even giving her a subtle little warning that, hey, I'm gonna marry your best friend. She's gonna be your new mommy. Like, she has to find out while all these other people are looking at her, and it's just crazy that he has no thought to even give her a little warning.
And I'm wondering if he did that intentionally so Rhaenyra wouldn't kind of put up a fight or anything, because once he's announced it to the entire small council, it's much harder to back down from. But if he told Rhaenyra in private, maybe he'd be afraid that she'd try to sway him. But now she kind of just has to pout and put up with it.
Swallow her own outburst at this betrayal.
Yeah. I guess we don't really see him try to work much on his relationship with Rhaenyra at all. The only one doing that work is Rhaenyra. And then obviously when she is betrayed, he continues to do absolutely nothing.
It's so sad. And even because, like, obviously the friendship between Rhaenyra and Alicent implodes when this happens. And Viserys is doing nothing to sort of try to ease up the situation and try to build bonds as a family between them. Like, obviously it would take a lot for Alicent to be able to be any sort of stepmother to Rhaenyra, but it's just Viserys gives some sad eyes when he sees how sad Rhaenyra is, and then that's that. There's nothing more. There's no, sorry I stole your friend. There's no later, yeah, I see that you're all alone now. Suck it up, buttercup. Yeah, he's just leaving it to wither away and looks the other way like he does.
But I think you're completely ignoring the day he died, when he made a single ounce of effort. That's the first and last time.
Yeah.
He tried to make them come together as a family, other than just closing his eyes.
That's true. Yeah, because it's like when things go wrong, that's when he's pulling out the we're a family card.
Oh, he does love that card. Should we talk about the uncle in the hen house? It's a huge mistake from Viserys' side to let Daemon just muck about however much he wants, and he keeps threatening these consequences, and then Daemon just ignores them and he does nothing. And when it comes to Rhaenyra, she obviously suffers greatly from this.
It seems like Daemon sees that Rhaenyra wants to feel seen. They're talking in the Valyrian language together, and he's bringing her presents.
We never see Viserys give Rhaenyra any presents apart from a huge responsibility.
This might be news to some of you, but Viserys actually has other children than Rhaenyra.
Really?
As you know, he does marry Alicent, Rhaenyra's best friend, and he sires children on her.
Viserys doesn't actually treat his other children as children, but rather as grandchildren. Viserys himself says he has only one child.
The fact that he makes so little effort getting to know and raise these other children, it's not a surprise that he sees Rhaenyra as his only child.
It's not like he has improved as a father. He continues his see nothing, do nothing, and he makes no effort in getting to know them. We don't really see any effort in trying to raise them, form emotional bonds with them. He's also not doing anything to kind of facilitate these children having any kind of positive, loving, genuine sibling bonds between Rhaenyra and his other children.
And we never even see them talk together, do we?
All of this is kind of building up to the absolute horror of a moment that is it episode 7?
Yes, I believe the Driftmark episode.
When we're talking about the mistakes that Viserys made with his other children, other than Rhaenyra, this has to be the worst one. So obviously Aemond has his eye forfeited to Viserys, can we say? And Viserys does nothing, closing his two still functioning and good eyes, as it were. He's doing absolutely nothing to resolve the conflict other than yell, basically, that he can't be fucked to deal with this.
It's so sad to see, because it's of course a very emotional episode and a very emotional moment. But with Viserys, there's no support either for his 10-year-old son who's just lost an eye. Viserys goes over to him and is just yelling at him. to tell him about what happened, to tell him who told him this rumor, which is, it's so painful to watch. Like, that's his father, and he just doesn't show any empathy for his son, who's sitting there and had just had an eye sewn together.
Truly, the lack of empathy is so wild in that scene.
The emotions are, of course, very high for everyone involved there. And then Viserys comes in and he just doesn't really help either side. He's just does nothing. Just yells a bit and wants everybody to be friends.
He doesn't end up torturing his already maimed son, but other than that, he does really kind of support Rhaenyra. He is not saying anything about punishing Luke. He's not yelling at Luke. He's not yelling at Rhaenyra. He is saying that anyone who continues to say these truths, I mean, rumors, are going to lose a tongue. So I do think that this scene truly proves to his children that are present, at least, the only one truly on their side is Alicent.
Aemond has his eye cut out, and Viserys does nothing. And then Alicent cuts Rhaenyra, but Viserys does nothing in regards to her either. So, like,
That's
while
true.
he's a bad father to all his children, in a way, because he just will not do anything.
That's true.
And it proves to all the children and the grandchildren that they can cut each other as much as they want, and he will not do anything anyway.
I mean, their father won't do anything, and also their king won't do anything. Alicent's children won't know this, but all the pain that Viserys put Aemma through, all of the agonizing he did to get a son and get an heir, and then when he receives, let's say, more than one, he treats them as nothing.
It's so sad, and also when you see that they know it. Like with Aegon, when he is being crowned king and he's riding in the carriage with Alicent, and he says about Viserys that he doesn't like me. We don't get a whole lot from Alicent's children in season 1, but the ones we do get, they do point to some of Viserys' letdowns as a parent, for sure.
Very good point.
So Viserys is obsessed, of course, with getting a son. Another one of his obsessions is dragon dreaming, which is a trait found within the Targaryen family where they can see the future or glimpses of the future. And yet, while he ignores his male children, he also manages to completely ignore the one child he has who is a dragon dreamer, Helena, his daughter by Alicent.
There is a beast beneath the boards.
And I mean, doesn't this speak to the fact that he pays so little attention to these children that he doesn't notice that the only way one of them speaks is in dragon dreaming riddles?
It's so strange because he's so obsessed with the idea of being a dragon dreamer himself, and that dream he has of like this male child that will be placed on the throne wearing Aegon the Conqueror's crown and all of this stuff. He's obsessed with that, and also Aegon the Conqueror's dream of the Song of Ice and Fire. This is like a recurring thing for him throughout the whole season, and yet there's just, do we even see him look at Helena?
And she seems to be a much more gifted dragon dreamer than him.
I also find it really strange that, like, with how obsessed he is, while this is so important that the Targaryen line continues and this prophecy is something that they know about so that they will be prepared.
Be prepared.
He only ever tells Rhaenyra about it. Why is this kept so secretive, and why is it placed entirely on her shoulders alone? Because this seems like to be a big reason why Rhaenyra feels it's important that she is heir, is because of this prophecy. And she's like, oh, I am the throne. And it's like, it's so much responsibility to put on a young girl's shoulder when there's quite a few Targaryens that maybe we could tell this to.
Can we just settle the fact that that is so incredibly dumb? If something is so important to be known, why do you keep it secret? and only between people who are at the very top, who are, historically speaking, most likely to be targets. I mean, it's so massively idiotic.
And if it's so important with his line that his line knows it, why wouldn't he say it to all of his children? Like, he tells one person, apart from like the gibberish pieces that he tells to Alicent just before he's like drifting off for the last time.
Oh, he's keeping all of the key information away from people, and you can't really judge people for acting without that knowledge. Speaking of Alicent, we've already touched on how marrying Alicent was a mistake in terms of how he imploded Rhaenyra's life, but it's not like it did that much good for Alicent either. He never would have married Alicent if Otto didn't send her there, I don't think. But it's not like he's some feeble child that just accidentally fell into a marriage. He's the king. He made a very, very bad choice. And then he made some more.
And then he just never stopped.
And then he died. I'm not even sure where I'm going with this point, but I do think it's kind of interesting that as a viewer, it's very easy to see how uncomfortable Alicent is during these talks she has with Viserys. She is sent there by Otto, but when you're looking at her face, that does not look like someone who is relaxed, and I'm getting tense just watching it, but he clearly does not pick up on that. To him, this whole charade thing is working so well. He did not see an uncomfortable child. Obviously, telling Alicent not to tell Rhaenyra about them talking, he is to some extent aware that what he's doing is not perhaps the best idea, especially in regards to Rhaenyra. I'm not sure if he's considering Alicent in all of this whatsoever.
So I don't know if he even knew this himself at this point, but it was very unfair to Alicent, his new bride, and maybe also her father again, Otto, that he did not inform them both that Rhaenyra would always be the heir, regardless of how many children of whatever gender Alicent gives him. Because this obviously makes a big difference in this union, the safety of Alicent, of her children, and also it's just a different position. If you're not at all able to provide any children that will become heir, that's a different position, right?
It's a completely different position because, I mean, what will they become? Truly, they will become potential threats. It's such a deceitful way of going about it. Alicent could have secured a much better position for her children if she were just married to some random lord. Then they are now threats to the heir to the throne. I mean, that's not something you want to put your children into. And he truly didn't make that clear enough.
No, he didn't.
Not to Otto and not to Corlys either.
And I think for both of them, it was so obvious that Viserys really wanted a son, and therefore I think they didn't even think that, oh, if my child provides him a male heir, then that heir will not be heir, in fact, and will just be set aside to be like just propagating of line, you know?
Otto says as much himself. He tells Alicent that when you bore the king a son, you ended however many years of uncertainty.
And it's also so sad to see that Alicent isn't really allowed to be her own person and experience motherhood and all these things, because the spotlight can never be on her and her birth with Aegon. It can only be about how Emma died.
I mean, we're thinking about the same scene, right? Where she's in that carriage and she's saying that the birth was easy. Clearly, in her mind, an attempt to kind of make Rhaenyra feel better about needing to find someone to marry and have children. I get that it's the wrong thing to say to these people who still have Emma, you know, it's very fresh and it's very, like, it's always going to be a wound for them. But Alicent can never try to find anything positive in her position as child bride and baby maker. She can never try to see the positive in it, because it's always going to be measured up against Emma. Whatever she does, it's always going to be measured up to the true wife, the first wife.
Yes, because Alicent is always just a placeholder. And even like later on, it's the second last episode before Viserys dies, he calls her Emma. Like, he never moves on. It's never Alicent that is really his love, his wife. It's always just Emma.
It would have been so much better if he didn't marry at all.
And he does say that he didn't think he would ever marry again. And
That he wouldn't have a son.
Maybe he could have stuck to those guns if this was how he decided to go about it, yeah.
He's not telling people to go to hell when they're pushing him into a marriage. He's just kind of like going along. He's having this date, whatever creepy thing is happening between him and Lena, when he clearly doesn't want to marry someone who's 12 years old. He's not putting his foot down about anything, and this is so clear, and it's leading to so many problems.
It's very sad to have to say that Daemon is right when he says that Viserys is weak. But it really shines throughout the whole season, just how much his weakness is to blame for what is to unfold.
So even though Alicent seemed to have love for him, and he probably also has love for Alicent, he was not the best for her. He was not a great influence in her life. Also, he really lets himself go. He could seriously do with a daddy makeover.
If Viserys was more of a political beast, it would probably have made more sense to marry Lena rather than Alicent.
Excuse me, a political beast? He's the most politically inept person I've ever seen in my fucking life. What does he say? He's forever doomed to anger one in pleasing another or something. Have you ever heard a better description of politics? It's all about trying to navigate unhappy people. Also, everybody knows that if you're a good politician, you know how to eat a lobster. God damn it.
I'm pretty sure that's like in the first class you take.
It is. It is. And we've talked about this before. His refusal to marry Lena. We're not going to say that is truly a mistake, because she's so young and it's so icky, and we're just really happy that she's spared the nightmare that Alicent has to go through.
The only thing we could maybe say is that maybe Corlys and Rhaenys would have been able to put more pressure for clarification on any eventual heirs, or if there was a male heir born to Lena, that maybe they would have been able to put more effective pressure for their grandchildren to be made heir above Rhaenyra. But again, that's just speculation.
I mean, he just doesn't understand politics at all. So he doesn't understand how much of an issue he is creating by doing these things. And I think maybe he has deluded himself into thinking that because he's king, it doesn't really matter what he does. He can just do whatever he wants. He doesn't seem to have an understanding that although it is typically an inherited birthright, it is also a political position. You do need to kind of play. You do need to look alive in every sense of the word. Other kings seem to kind of try to strengthen and maintain bonds. We see that Viserys does that exactly once, at least from the books and also from the main series. We know that other kings do kind of go visit the other kingdoms, and they try to keep the bonds strong with other important lords, and they make sure to strengthen the relationship, maintain it. And we don't really see Viserys do that at all. He seems to be much more interested in staying at home, playing with his Lego set, and just do whatever he wants, enjoy his life. And he truly seems to lack the comprehension that being king is, although it is typically a birthright that is given to you, it's also a political position. And maybe because he was never really trained for it, like that was not supposed to be his path in life, he seems to just think, cool, I got this thing and now I do whatever I want with it. We've already touched on the awfulness, but there are more mistakes Viserys made when it comes to Daemon.
We see from the very beginning of the season that Viserys very desperately tries to include Daemon in the small council in whichever way he can. But Daemon is making quite a bit of it very difficult. And Viserys is not able to at all punish Daemon or keep up with any of the threats he makes.
Daemon does so many things that really need a little bit of correcting, I think.
Yes, he's like on the small council as well, and yet we see it, I think we see it several times, that it like his chair is just empty because he didn't show up. I do believe it's in episode 1 when Daemon has the gold cloaks slaughter and dismember citizens around King's Landing in order to like round up the criminals. And this is obviously not how they usually deal with crime.
He just decides for himself he's going to be both the law and executioner and goes with it. Although it's a bit debated, the whole heir for a day speech, he just goes to fight at the Stepstones when he wants to, even though Viserys wants him not to. He's essentially banned to the Vale to go see his wife, and he's just nah. And he directly defies the orders as he's just taking Dragonstone. It's like he doesn't see Viserys as truly above him. And Viserys does absolutely nothing.
And when Daemon is returning from the Stepstones and he's trying outright to ruin Rhaenyra's reputation, and he's admitting to Viserys that he has soiled her, as they say.
Instant death.
And he wants to marry her and everything. And even then, it's like, there's no punishment. There's just, oh, go home. Go away.
Viserys truly is so weak here. He's really proving that he is just putting his own personal feelings and his own aversion to conflict over actually being king.
When Daemon is taking Dragonstone and is inviting everyone to come to the wedding he's gonna have with Mysaria, in that letter, he specifically titles himself the true heir to the throne, despite this taking place after Rhaenyra has been made heir. Isn't that some sort of treason in itself?
I mean, it definitely sounds like it should be. And kind of hand in hand with how much of a political failure Viserys is, I think we can talk about the fact that he is flip-flopping like absolutely nobody's business. A flag in the wind has nothing on Viserys. He's just all over the place. We see that he starts out by telling Rhaenyra in episode 4 that truth does not matter, only perception. But by his end in episode 8, that truth is clearly inconsequential, and so is also perception. The fact that everyone seems to believe/know Rhaenyra's children are bastards, he just flat out refuses to see that. And I also kind of love how this parallels, is it Baratheon who in episode 1 calls Rhaenys the queen who never was, and Otto is saying you could have his tongue for that. Viserys is just casually saying cutting out tongues will not change the succession, and then we cut to him actually threatening everybody with being a tongue shorter when they are trying to challenge the succession. I mean, do you get any more obvious than that? I'm not even sure, but I do really like that parallel for whatever it is worth.
I think it also shows in how Viserys names Rhaenyra heir, and then after Aegon is born, he's like wondering out loud to Alicent if maybe he's made a mistake, he's not sure about it. But then very swiftly after this, he privately tells Rhaenyra that he's 100% backing her after having bestowed some doubt in his decision-making with Alicent. But he doesn't clarify anything with her, and he doesn't make any of this clear to the other lord. And during the hunt, we see that Viserys is fighting with Rhaenyra in front of all the lords present, and they are loudly shouting. Yeah, it's in public, and they're shouting at each other. And the law that has been established quite recently during Jaehaerys' reign was that the eldest son would inherit. And this hunt is Aegon's second name day, which would make a lot of sense to name him heir at this point. And it's what all the people there are kind of assuming is going to happen. And this fight with then Rhaenyra kind of makes it seem like Viserys is gonna name Aegon heir, and Rhaenyra is upset and they're having a fight, but Viserys is not above tradition and duty, and so It's just a very unfortunate moment to have such a loud statement and such a fight in front of everybody publicly, and then not doing anything to then make it clear to all the lords that no, Rhaenyra is the heir forever and ever, 100%,
I do,
absolutely.
in fact,
Yes.
exist above duty and tradition.
This is
or
the new
whatever.
law now.
I think this is a really good point, and it's also really exacerbating the fact that he's not making clear that I think, from what I can see, this seems to be a change that he is making going forward.
She and Selena's firstborn child, regardless of gender, will inherit the Iron Throne from her.
But he's not making that clear to anybody else that this is going to be a change. It seems maybe not even Rhaenyra, because Rhaenyra says that Luke and Rhaena's sons will inherit Driftmark as she's talking to Rhaenys.
Baela will be queen of the Seven Kingdoms, and her sons will be heirs to the throne.
Even as a viewer, we're kind of left wondering, is this just an exception? Is Rhaenyra just an exception to this rule? Or is it now supposed to be the eldest child will inherit regardless of gender, as he's telling Corlys? He's kind of telling Corlys is a permanent change, but how on earth can he tell him? And Rhaenyra is not in on that. So his entire philosophy is resting on the fact that people will be mind readers, but only when he wants to. He is not even sure himself of what he wants or what is the right thing to do. He's telling everybody something differently. He's doing absolutely nothing to support Rhaenyra. He's doing obviously nothing to support anyone else either. And then when all of this is culminating, when everything we have gone over is just making this entire family, and with it, consequentially, the entire realm, is just going up in flames. Viserys is just insisting on the power of friendship and magic.
My little pony, my little pony.
And he's just telling everybody to get along and be happy. And everyone there is just feeling guilty because there is a dead man talking, and I suppose we'll try to put our best foot forward and make this work for his last night. But I mean, the damage is there. He's done nothing to rectify it. His philosophy truly seems to be that not talking about it will make it go away.
So do you get it now?
I get it. How on earth did he end up being called Viserys the Peaceful when isn't he to blame for the war that is swiftly unleashed upon his death? Did we miss anything? Has he made more mistakes? Sorry, what other mistakes did he make? Because we know they're out there.
I feel like he made more.